Emma wanted an off-grid escape, a solo adventure into Argentina's forgotten heartlands. What she found was a town untouched by time, with windows that stared back and silence that screamed. One dusty postcard led her into Valle de Luto, but what the locals said after chilled her to the bone: that town doesn't exist anymore. Why did they speak her name like they already knew her? And why do her photos from the trip keep disappearing? What if you found a town that refused to forget you, even when the rest of the world already had? Emma Carter had always been drawn to the unknown. She wasn't a thrill-seeker in the usual sense, she didn't bungee jump or chase hurricanes, but she had a quiet obsession with places the world had forgotten. A freelance travel writer with a passion for off-the-map locations, she'd visited ghost towns before, but none had pulled at her quite like this one. It began with a worn postcard she found tucked inside a second-hand Spanish novel at a flea market in Buenos Aires. The image showed an eerie, fog-covered plaza with the faded caption, Valle de Luto, Provincia de La Rioja, 1973. Something about the handwriting on the back, a rushed "you must see this place before it's too late," set a hook deep in her. That night, she couldn't sleep. The name echoed like an unsolved riddle. When she asked locals in La Rioja about the town, their responses were either confusion or dismissive laughter. One man at a roadside empanada stall muttered something in Spanish that stuck with her: "Ese lugar ya no exist." That place doesn't exist anymore. Undeterred, Emma tracked down old maps in provincial libraries and cross-referenced terrain records. No Valle de Luto. No record of anything by that name in official databases. But the postcard had a stamp, and the handwriting looked fresh. Using old satellite scans and a few rumors shared on obscure travel forums, she followed a trail of dirt roads and overgrown paths into the mountains, her rental car protesting every bump. After several hours, the GPS went blank. Her phone battery drained faster than usual. Just when she thought she might have been chasing shadows, she saw it, a rusted sign half buried in weeds: Bienvenidos a Valle de Luto. Welcome. The town unfolded like a memory. Stone buildings with cracked plaster, rusted iron balconies, and shutters that swayed slightly in the wind. It wasn't abandoned in the traditional sense, it looked paused. The plaza from the postcard stood exactly as it had decades ago. A dried-up fountain sat in the center, surrounded by still benches and closed storefronts. No birds, no barking dogs, no human voices. Just wind. Emma parked and walked cautiously, her boots crunching gravel. The air smelled of old smoke and dry earth. She took a few photos, but each time she reviewed them, her phone glitched and the images disappeared. She thought it was a signal error, or maybe her battery was fried from the rough journey. Still, unease crept under her skin. She found a small inn at the edge of the plaza. The wooden sign above the door read Hostal San Perdido, the letters barely hanging on. Inside, the reception area looked like someone had just left. A cup of tea sat on the counter, half full and cold. Dust coated everything, but there was no cobwebs. The register showed the last guest signed in 45 years ago. Her name wasn't there, but a page had been ripped out. She decided to stay anyway. The place weirdly had water and power. That night, she journaled about the town, noting how it felt more like a stage set waiting for actors. Just as she was about to fall asleep, she heard footsteps upstairs, even though she was the only guest. Her breath caught. She grabbed her flashlight and tiptoed into the hallway. The sound had stopped. She told herself it was the house settling. Old wood, old pipes. That's all. The next morning, she drove back toward the town where she'd last filled up, but after an hour, she found herself circling back to Valle de Luto. The road had curved differently than she remembered. Landmarks she'd passed before were gone. Her GPS still wouldn't load. When she asked an old woman outside a fruit stand for directions, the woman looked startled. "You were at Valle de Luto?" she asked in Spanish. Emma nodded. The woman's face tightened with something like fear. That town was erased. No one goes there anymore. They say it died with its secrets. You must leave. But Emma didn't leave. Not yet. The town had questions, and she needed answers. That night, she sat in the plaza under a moonlit sky, rereading the postcard. She noticed for the first time that the postmark had no date. Only the word Nunca, which meant never. The next morning, the fountain in the plaza had water again, and a girl in white stood beside it, staring directly at Emma. When Emma blinked, she was gone. The wind howled louder that evening as Emma explored more of Valle de Luto, her boots scraping against the uneven cobblestone. She kept expecting to see someone appear from behind the half-open doors or from the shadows of the buildings that lined the streets, but no one came. Each structure looked frozen in time, intact but lifeless, like they were being preserved for some unseen purpose. As she walked past a shuttered school, its chalkboard still marked with faint writing, she spotted a narrow alley that seemed out of place. The entrance was lined with stone walls, and ivy crept over a metal sign that had nearly rusted to dust. She followed the alley to a small courtyard, where she discovered a heavy wooden door with its hinges barely holding. Inside was a storage room filled with old crates, tattered books, and yellowed papers. On the far wall, behind broken shelves, she spotted something pinned with rusted nails. A torn, hand-drawn map of Valle de Luto, but it was different from the town she'd seen. The map was labeled in Spanish, but some of the areas didn't match what she had walked through. It had roads that no longer existed and buildings that weren't in ruins, but in full color, detailed with names and even the faces of people. In the corner of the map, a red circle was drawn around a location marked only as La Bovda, the vault. Something about that name pulled at her gut. Below it, in jagged cursive, a note read, "Only for those who remember." As she unpinned the map and folded it carefully into her backpack, she heard a creak behind her. She spun around. No one was there. The air felt suddenly heavier, like the room itself had inhaled. She stepped outside, blinking into the fading light, and noticed something new. The town bell tower had begun to chime. She hadn't even known it could ring. It struck 3 times, and then silence. Back in the inn, she laid the map across the bed and began comparing it to the path she had taken earlier. There were inconsistencies, entire sections of the town missing from what she had walked. She realized then that the town had shifted, or more terrifyingly, that she had only seen what it wanted her to see. Just as she was tracing a route to the red-circled vault, a dusty leather-bound book slid out from the bed's wooden frame. She opened it slowly. Inside were handwritten entries, a diary of sorts. The ink had bled with time, but the pages were filled with observations of the town. They don't age. They just wait. If you hear your name spoken in the wind, do not answer. She walks the square at dusk. She knows you're here. Emma's hands trembled as she read entry after entry. Each one detailed the same things she'd seen, the plaza, the fountain, the vanishing paths, and they dated back decades. The final entry stopped mid-sentence. I finally found the vault. Inside was, and then nothing. Determined to find La Bovda, Emma left the inn at dawn. The sky was dull grey, casting long shadows. Using the map, she followed a curved path that led past a collapsed train station and a dried riverbed, areas that hadn't been visible before. Her compass spun uselessly, but the landmarks matched the ones drawn on the parchment. As she moved deeper into the outskirts, the air grew colder. Trees bent unnaturally, and birds stopped chirping. She reached a clearing where a building sat alone, squat, square, and made of stone. It looked like a mausoleum with no door. In the center of the stone wall was a carved spiral. As Emma approached, she felt her fingers tingle. She pressed her palm against the spiral, and with a grinding sound, a panel slid open, revealing a narrow stairwell leading underground. Emma hesitated but descended slowly. The stairway was lit by thin shafts of light from cracks above. At the bottom, the space opened into a cavern-like room, with walls lined in shelves holding bottles, photos, and mementos. Names were etched into the stone, some scratched out, others glowing faintly in gold. In the center stood a pedestal with another book. This one wasn't dusty. It looked new. Her name was written on the cover. Emma Carter. Her chest tightened. She opened it, and the first page read, "Welcome back." She staggered backward, heart pounding. This wasn't just a forgotten place. It was remembering her. A noise echoed behind her, footsteps. Someone was coming down the stairs, but no shadows appeared. She didn't wait to find out. She bolted up the stairs and ran through the clearing, the map clutched in her hand. When she reached the plaza, she found that the fountain was overflowing now, water pouring out in steady streams. The buildings had shifted again. A child's toy sat on a step that hadn't been there before. She turned, looked at the inn, and saw that the sign had changed. It now read Casa de los que recuerdan, House of Those Who Remember. Emma no longer trusted the sun. It rose at odd angles now, casting shadows that didn't match the shape of the buildings, elongating corners that should have been short and shrinking alleyways that once led somewhere. Each morning she stepped outside the inn. Something in the town had changed. A new window appeared on the chapel. A door that led to an empty shop now opened into a room with candles still burning. She marked the changes in her journal, trying to make sense of them, but the shifting town seemed to play with her, showing her pieces and taking them back just as fast. Despite her fear, Emma couldn't leave. Part of her still believed there was a logic beneath the madness, a secret to uncover, a reason why the town kept moving but never aging. She continued searching, following the path the map suggested, hoping to find answers inside the twisted layers of Valle de Luto. While exploring a vine-covered garden at the rear of the town's former schoolhouse, she heard her name. Not loudly, but faintly, as if whispered by someone standing just behind her ear. She spun around. No one. The air felt cold, even though the sun beat down from above. Then she heard it again. Emma. This time, the voice was deeper, like it came from the earth. She ran from the garden, her breath sharp in her chest. Back inside the inn, she locked the door and pressed her back against it. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, from upstairs, came a series of slow, deliberate knocks. Knock. Pause. Knock. She crept to the foot of the stairs and waited. When she finally gathered the courage to climb them, step by step, she reached the second floor and found nothing. No figure, no sound. Just her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. That night, the town spoke again. Not with voices, but with visions. She dreamed of a woman in a long dress walking the plaza. Her face was blurred, her arms outstretched, and every step she took left behind scorched footprints. The dream felt real. So real that when Emma woke, the scent of smoke still lingered in the air, and the sheets on her bed were damp with sweat. The town wanted her to remember something, but what? The next day, Emma followed a new path that had appeared behind the chapel. It led to a small house, almost hidden by tall grass. Inside, dust coated every surface, but the bed was made, and a warm teacup sat on a table. As she approached it, the door slammed shut behind her. She froze. A photo on the wall caught her attention, a black and white image of a family. Her heart skipped. The woman in the photo wore the same necklace Emma had been gifted as a child, a chain with a tiny silver bell. Emma's mother had died when she was just 8 years old, and her aunt had raised her in the US, always dismissing questions about her origins. She'd been told her family was from Argentina but nothing more. Staring at the photo, a new thought crept in. What if this wasn't just a story she had stumbled into? What if she belonged to it? That night, Emma sat by the fountain again, trying to piece it all together. That's when the old woman approached. She looked like she had stepped out of time. Her face was lined like cracked porcelain, her eyes deep and dark, her clothes hand-stitched and faded. She didn't introduce herself, only said, "You've come home, Emma. The town remembers you." Emma stammered, asking who she was and what she meant, but the woman only said, "Your blood is tied to this soil. You must finish what was started, or the town will never rest." Then she handed Emma an old locket and walked away, vanishing into the mist. Inside the locket was a name carved into the metal, Catalina de la Cruz. Emma knew then, that was her grandmother's name. She had heard it whispered once during a family argument as a child, a name followed by silence and grief. The next day, as she wandered through the main street, the shop signs changed. They now bore familiar names. Her family name appeared above the bakery. The town wasn't just haunting her. It was welcoming her. As night fell, Emma returned to the vault and opened the book again. More pages had appeared. The entries were written in her handwriting, though she hadn't touched the pen. They told the story of a town betrayed, a girl taken, a promise broken. Valle de Luto had suffered because of something her ancestors did, something that needed to be undone. But what, exactly? The pieces were forming, but the picture was still blurry. She heard a noise and looked out the window. In the plaza below, the girl in white had returned, standing still under the moonlight. When Emma moved to step outside, the girl turned and smiled. "You remember now," she said. Then she vanished once more. The more Emma uncovered, the less certain she became that time followed normal rules in Valle de Luto. By now, days didn't feel like days. The sky shifted too quickly, the moon sometimes rose where the sun should have been, and the air felt heavier each hour she stayed. There was a stillness to everything, like the town itself was holding its breath. Emma began noticing recurring sounds, a ticking, like a clock with no visible source, and the faint chime of bells echoing at the same hour every night. They always rang at 11:46 p.m., and with them came the scent of burning wood, the same scent that lingered in her dreams. Her journal pages filled quickly as she pieced together what happened here. Through the strange diary entries and whispers of the old woman, she learned of the final night the town was alive, a moment frozen in time that had never truly ended. And that moment was coming again. It had started decades ago, during the time of Argentina's dictatorship, when fear lived in every household and secrets could mean survival. Valle de Luto had once been a refuge, a sanctuary for those escaping the violence of the dirty war. Teachers, artists, and families who refused to swear allegiance to the regime hid here, hoping the remoteness of the town would protect them. But someone had betrayed them. One of their own had handed over the names, the coordinates, and the truth. On one night in July, soldiers arrived with no warning. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They simply came and took parents, children, elders. Fires were lit. People vanished. Some resisted. Others were silenced. And when the night ended, the town had emptied. Not just of people, but of memory. The official records were erased. It was as if Valle de Luto had never existed. Emma knew this because the diary in the vault had continued to write itself, revealing more pieces of the past each time she opened it. Each new entry bled into the next, pages soaked with grief and loss, and yet the writing changed tone when it spoke of a little girl who was hidden in a cellar beneath the chapel, the only survivor. That child had a name, but it was scratched out. All that remained was a faint initial. C. As Emma read this, her locket grew warm against her chest. The past wasn't just history here. It was alive, demanding to be acknowledged. That night, the bells rang again, and this time Emma didn't stay in the inn. She followed the sound to the chapel. Inside, candles were already burning. At the altar stood the girl in white. Emma approached slowly. The girl's face was clear now, pale, familiar. She smiled, eyes glowing faintly, and placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Tonight, it happens again," she said softly. "Unless you stop it." Emma looked around, the chapel walls closing in with memories not her own. The girl raised a hand and, with a flash, Emma saw it. The entire massacre playing before her eyes like a film on fast forward. Soldiers bursting into homes, the screams, the fires, the betrayal. And then she saw him, a man with sharp eyes and a trembling hand. He stood with the soldiers. He had handed over the town's map. He wasn't a stranger. He looked like one of the men from the photo Emma had found earlier. Her great-uncle. The betrayal had come from inside her own bloodline. That's why the town had called her back. Not to haunt her, but to offer a chance at redemption. She had to break the loop. The girl led Emma to the cellar under the chapel. It was still there, untouched, filled with old bedding and a single wooden box. Inside was a bundle of letters written in Catalina's hand, Emma's grandmother. The letters were desperate, pleading for forgiveness, describing how her brother had betrayed the town under pressure from the military, swearing they'd kill the whole family if he didn't. But she had saved the child, hidden her under the chapel floor, and fled with the locket, the same one Emma now wore. As the bells chimed again, louder this time, the wind outside turned violent. Emma heard voices, not ghostly ones, but echoes of people reliving their final night. Windows slammed open, doors creaked, and distant fires glowed through broken glass. The town was reliving the massacre, again and again, night after night, unless someone stopped it. Emma stepped out into the plaza, holding the letters. She shouted the truth into the night. He betrayed you, but she tried to save you. The wind paused. Everything froze. The sky darkened, and from the shadows, Dozens of translucent figures appeared. Men, women, children, the people of Valle de Luto. They didn't speak, but their eyes told her they had heard. One by one, they turned toward the chapel, then to Emma, and slowly began to vanish into light. But one stayed, the girl in white. She stepped forward and held out her hand. Emma placed the locket in her palm. The girl smiled, and then both she and the locket dissolved into ash. The plaza fell silent. The wind stopped. The bells ceased their tolling. For the first time since Emma had arrived, the air smelled clean. Still, she knew the town wasn't finished with her yet. Redemption came with responsibility, and she wasn't done uncovering what still remained hidden beneath the surface of Valle de Luto. Emma woke the next morning expecting to feel a shift, something to show the night before had changed things for good. But as she stepped outside the inn, the first thing she saw was the same plaza, the same fountain, and the same eerie stillness that had haunted her since her arrival. The sense of release she'd felt the night before had faded, replaced with confusion and a growing fear that nothing had truly ended. She packed her things, folded the diary, map, and letters into her bag, and stepped into her car. She turned the key. The engine sputtered but started. She felt hope return. The gravel crunched under her tires as she made her way back down the road that had once brought her into town. But after an hour of driving, the terrain didn't change. The same bent tree appeared on the left, the same crooked fence on the right. She hadn't left. She had looped back into Valle de Luto. Emma stopped the car and got out, heart racing. She walked on foot in the opposite direction, through the brush, past landmarks she hadn't seen before. When she emerged through a clearing, she stood back in the plaza. Her footsteps had brought her back again. She tried the trail near the chapel, then the alley behind the school, even the old railway tracks. Each time, the path either disappeared or curved back into town. Her compass spun wildly, her phone refused to turn on, and even her watch ticked in random rhythms, sometimes jumping backwards. Time, space, direction, all of it was gone. Valle de Luto wasn't letting her go. In desperation, she returned to the vault. Maybe the book had answers. But when she opened it, the pages were blank. The ink that had guided her so far had dried up, and the surface felt cold to the touch. Emma stared at the cover with her name on it and whispered, "What do you want from me?" The walls seemed to shudder, as if something beneath the town had heard her plea. That night, the bells rang again. Louder. This time, there were footsteps in the street. Not ghosts, not memories, footsteps. Real, heavy, deliberate. Emma peered from the window. Men in military uniforms walked through the plaza, rifles slung across their backs. But they weren't alive. Their faces were grey, their eyes hollow, and they marched without sound. Repeating the loop. Echoes of the past brought back to life again. Emma ran to the schoolhouse, hiding inside one of the old classrooms. Her breath was shallow, her hands trembling. On the blackboard, new writing had appeared. One must stay. She didn't understand. Stay for what? She flipped through the book again, and a single sentence had returned. The town cannot remember unless someone chooses to forget. She stared at the words, heart pounding. Someone had to take the burden, hold the memory, bear the pain, or the town would trap every outsider who entered. And now, it had chosen her. The truth hit her like a wave. Her arrival wasn't an accident. The postcard had been a calling. Her bloodline was linked to this place, and the town had been waiting for someone with the right memory, the right guilt, the right key. She had opened the wound, and now she had to close it. Determined, Emma returned to the plaza and stood at the fountain. The water had stopped flowing. She shouted into the silence, demanding to speak to whoever or whatever held the power here. The wind picked up, and from it formed the ghostly figures of the townspeople. They circled her slowly, watching with sorrowful eyes. The old woman appeared once more and spoke only one word, "Choose." Emma fell to her knees, sobbing. If she stayed, she could release the town, end its loop, allow the spirits to pass. But it meant vanishing from the world above. No return. No name. No Emma. She would become the one who forgot, holding the town's grief in silence forever. But if she refused, the town would go on trapping others, pulling them in, twisting their minds, bending time around them like a prison with no walls. She thought of all the people who might stumble across Valle de Luto the way she had, innocent and unaware. She couldn't let that happen. With tears running down her cheeks, Emma stood and nodded. "I choose to stay," she whispered. The spirits closed their eyes. A calm breeze swept across the plaza. The bell tower chimed once, not 13 times like before. Just once. Emma's backpack, the diary, the letters, all turned to dust. Her clothes faded into white. Her body shimmered and vanished into light. The plaza brightened, the buildings shifted back into silence, and the town sighed with relief. The sun rose in a perfect arc for the first time in what felt like forever. But days later, in a modern city far from the mountains, a traveler in a bookstore picked up a second-hand novel in Spanish. Tucked inside was a faded postcard. On the back, in elegant handwriting, it read, "Come see Valle de Luto, before it forgets you too." It began with silence. Not the unnatural stillness that haunted Valle de Luto before, but a peaceful, final kind of quiet. The kind that comes after a storm has passed. Emma was gone. At least, the version of her the world knew had vanished. The plaza stood still, the fountain glimmered with calm water, and the windows in the buildings no longer shifted with shadows. The town, for the first time in decades, was resting. But even in rest, something remained. Not everyone had forgotten. In a nearby village called Cuesta del Sol, just over the ridge from Valle de Luto's hidden borders, an old man sitting at a cafe spoke to a tourist about a strange woman who came down from the mountain once. He said her eyes looked like they carried 100 years of sorrow. He never saw her again. The locals dismissed it as a tale. After all, they insisted, there was no town up there. Nothing but forest and ruins. They said it burned down a long time ago. And the roads? Gone. Eaten by the earth. But sometimes, at night, the bell tower can still be heard faintly in the distance, though no one has ever been able to find its source. Back in the heart of the Lost Valley, Emma remained, though not as she had before. She had become part of it, a memory living in every stone, every breeze, every faded photograph on the walls. Her voice was no longer her own, but it could still be felt. Tourists who got too curious, hikers who wandered too far, sometimes spoke of a feeling, like someone was watching kindly, almost protectively. The town did not trap them anymore, but it also didn't fully open itself. Valle de Luto had become a place of warning and a place of peace. Its shadows were no longer hungry, but they remembered. They remembered betrayal, sorrow, silence, and a girl who gave up her world to save theirs. One night, years later, a young woman named Sophia came across a forum online that talked about places that didn't exist. Ghost towns that never showed up on maps. Deep in the thread, buried beneath conspiracy theories and blurry pictures, was a scanned image of a postcard. Valle de Luto. She paused, her heart beating faster. She'd seen that name before, in her grandmother's journal. A journal she found in a locked trunk after her grandmother's funeral. The same journal that mentioned a cousin named Emma who vanished during a trip to Argentina decades ago. Sophia felt the pull, the same one Emma had once followed. She reached out to a contact in the forum who claimed to have visited the area near Cuesta del Sol. He sent her a single sentence in reply: "Some places don't stay buried. But they remember who walks their paths." Sophia booked her flight a week later. She didn't tell her parents. She didn't really know why she had to go, only that she did. She followed the same trail. The same mountain paths. When she asked about Valle de Luto, she received the same dismissive waves, the same warnings. But when she showed the postcard, an old woman at a roadside market froze. "That place is grief," she whispered. "But maybe you belong to it." Sophia didn't turn back. She drove the dirt road with a printed satellite map, following shadows. Hours passed. Then her GPS died. The air turned still. And just like before, the broken sign appeared. Bienvenidos a Valle de Luto. The town had shifted again. Not much, but enough. Some buildings looked newer. The inn had a fresh coat of paint. The chapel was boarded up. The fountain still trickled softly. Sophia stepped into the plaza and instantly felt it, a whisper in the wind. Not a warning. A greeting. A welcome. She saw a woman in white in the distance. She blinked. Gone. She walked to the inn and found a key waiting on the front desk with her name scratched onto a wooden tag. She didn't panic. Somehow, deep inside, she understood. She had been expected. That night, she dreamed of a voice calling to her from beneath the fountain. When she woke, she found a box beside her bed. Inside was a silver locket and a folded page torn from an old book. It said only, "The town is at peace, but the memory lives in you now." Sophia stepped outside, barefoot on the plaza stones, and looked up at the stars. They shined brighter here. She knew then that Emma wasn't gone. She had become something larger, the breath of the wind, the rhythm in the bells, the protector of the past. Sophia whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." The wind answered softly, "Just one word, remember." And far away, in another bookstore, another copy of the old Spanish novel sat on a shelf. Inside it, a postcard waited. The image had changed. It showed a young woman standing in the plaza, her hair blowing gently in the wind. The words on the back were new. "She remembered for us. Will you?"